Hi guys, and welcome back to the only channel on YouTube with 57 subscribers. So today we're going to be doing a, I suppose what you call a shootout. So we're going to be comparing the Kemper profiler to the neural DSP quad Cortex, and we're going to kind of see how each fares against each other. Because I've seen a few videos, and I found the response quite varied. I've seen some people say that the Kemper is still like the unchallenged leader of, I suppose, amp stealing, but I've also seen some people like Rabia say that they kind of prefer the sound of the quad Cortex, and I find that quite interesting. I've already tried out the quad Cortex in its own setting, and I'll express some of my opinions from my experience of using it and how I think it fares against the Kemper profiler, because the Kemper is quite an interesting bit of technology in the fact that it's been out for, I think it's getting to over 10 years now. It's still managing to compete against like new versions of the Axe effects which have come out, and it's still competing against the Line 6 Helix. It's competing against the Head Rush. It's staying at the top. I mean, you know, arguable which one is better, but it's still competing against all these amp modelers. So when the quad Cortex came out, that kind of brought it into question, like, is the profiler the only thing which can do this now? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by comparing some clean tones from the Kemper profiler and the quad Cortex. Then I'm going to compare the crunchy tones and the heavily distorted metal tones and some lead tones and see how they can compare. And I'll let you guys know what my thoughts are after I've played through some of these. So just to clarify, this isn't actually comparing the same amp modeled on both different profilers. This is just comparing some similar tones and seeing how they sound. I am thinking about doing a video in the future where I do compare the same amp on different profilers. So if that's something you want to see, please leave a comment down below and let's just dive right into the tones. So one of the first things I want to address with the Quad Cortex, I found it very easy to get the hang of very quickly. It took me probably about a day to understand most of the functionality of it, which is pretty impressive considering the Kemper Profiler took me about 2 months and I'm still figuring it out. And I think this is a bit of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, I like the fact that it's really easy to use. You can get your sound set up really nicely. But I find in terms of editing your tone, you don't have quite so many options. So with the Kemper Profiler, on every single profile you have, you can edit everything. You can edit the clarity, you can edit the pick attack, you can edit the tube bias, you can edit almost everything. You can add compression. It's really amazing what you can actually do with it. Still blows me away how much you can edit the sound of the amp. With the profiles on the Neural DSP, from my experience, I don't know if there's any extra functionalities which I haven't found out about yet, but I find that you can't edit the profiles to as much detail as you can on the Kemper. And this isn't quite so much of a big deal if you don't really care about that, if you just want your sound straight off the bat. The Neural DSP, it seems to add in a lot of these natural kind of sounds that a lot of people are looking for, like that power sag sound. The Kemper, you have to dial it in. So if the profile doesn't have as much power sag as you want, you have to increase that yourself, which can be a bit of a pain. But I don't really think it's all that bad personally. So I suppose that's one thing that I would maybe put the Kemper above the Neural DSP with, just editability. The next thing I would say is software-wise. So this is where I've got kind of come up with a bit of a problem, because I really like the way the software works with the Neural DSP. So with the Neural DSP, instead of a app that you can edit the amps and cabs and everything, I assume at the moment they have an app where you can browse profiles that people have already made and save them onto your device. I think that's fantastic. It's presented really nicely, and there's quite a nice community. It looks really good. The thing is, the Kemper have just come out with an update, which means that you can edit your amplifier on an iPad. You can edit whatever sound you have on an iPad as long as your Kemper is connected to the internet and your iPad is connected to the internet, because apparently you can do that now. So, I would say that, for me, that kind of puts the Kemper a little bit above. But the downside to the Kemper is that you don't get to access or browse your sounds quite as easily. You can't just like scroll through and go, oh, I want to try out this sound and do it. Like, you can do that in Rig Manager, but you can't do that on the iPad app. So maybe you consider that as a downside to it. So another thing is with Kemper's Rig Exchange, it's not very pretty. It's not very nice to look at, so you might find some of the profiles don't stick in your mind as well if you're just looking at them as they will with the Neural DSP, because with the Neural DSP software, everything that's been edited on the Neural DSP you can see on the little image they have. They basically got like a little thumbnail right next to it, and you can see all the effects and all the amps that are put on there. So that's really, really cool. I'd say in terms of an editability via app, Kemper wins this one for me. Now the next thing is, this is a big selling point. So with the Kemper app, you can only have one rig at a time. One rig, one cab. Now this might not be too bad, because you can combine rigs. You can't do anything with it live, so you can't have one rig panned left and one rig panned right. They are combined into a single rig. Again, might not be too much of a big deal if you don't really care about all that. If your live performance or recording doesn't require that, it's not really that much of a big deal. But if it does, it may be a very big deal. And in saying this, because of this process, because of the routing options you have with the Neural DSP, it is actually breathtaking. You can have up to 4 instruments plugged into the Neural DSP at one time. That makes things a lot easier. So if you're going to a show and your bass player's like, I don't want to carry my amp to this show, you go, don't worry, plug into this. So yeah, the Neural DSP seems to be a lot more powerful with that. Another fantastic thing that you can do with this setup is you can pan sounds. So what I like to do, because in my band I am the only guitarist, I will like to add some stereo delay. On the Kemper, I find it doesn't really translate quite so well. It sounds a bit phasey. With the Neural DSP, you can have an entirely different rig, an entirely different cab setup, entirely different distortion pedals, different amplifier, hard panned, and then you can put a 7 millisecond delay on it as compared to the one that's maybe panned left. So the one panned right has got a 7 millisecond delay on it, and it just sounds like there's 2 guitarists playing. And I think that just really puts the Neural DSP at the top by a mile in terms of this. Next thing, switching between rigs. This was a little bit of a turning point for me, because I was like on the path to going, oh, maybe the Quad Cortex is beating the Kemper for me. Just like sound wise, I was thinking maybe it's doing it, because you know it's easier to get a usable tone. Here's where the problems arise. If you switch between rigs, so between a completely different setup, you will get a delay. It's probably like 1.5 to 2 millisecond delay. So if you're playing a solo and you want to switch back to rhythm and you want a completely different rhythm sound, you need to wait for that millisecond of silence to go before your rhythm sound comes back in and again, and that will make a difference on stage. The way they've managed to get around this, they have been quite smart about it, is they say if you have your entire setup in there, because as I said before, within that setup you can have as many amps, as many cabs as that setup will allow. So you can have your lead tone, your acoustic tone, your clean tone, your sort of distorted grungy tone, all in the same patch basically. And that's fantastic, but the problem that I found when doing this was I wasn't able to fit in as much into that patch because I had the panning going on, and I quite liked that. I wanted to keep that, but I couldn't keep that and then have an acoustic sound and that panned as well, and then have a lead sound that's also quite a wide sound all together in the same patch. That was not really doable for me. So creating those sort of same sounds would have been a lot more difficult. So that was a bit of a kind of an opposite of a selling point for me. I found that a little bit off-putting. Because with the Kemper, not only will it switch between rigs, just like that, no delay, you also have spillover, so if you have reverb or delay, it doesn't matter if you switch to a completely different sound with no reverb, no delay, nothing. Those sounds will carry over. To me, that makes the Kemper a very, very desirable tool, particularly for live playing. It doesn't matter quite so much in recording, but live, it really does make a difference, in my opinion. And another selling point, the Quad Cortex is incredibly light. It is so light, it almost weighs nothing. It is insane. The Kemper, it's lighter than carrying around a tube amp, but it's still heavy. Particularly if you're like me and you got the rack. It's a heavy bit of kit, and it will make your back hurt after a while. So that's something to consider, particularly if you're carrying around the pedal, because that thing is a lump of metal as well. On one hand, it's great because probably less likely to break because it's surrounded by so much metal, whereas the Quad Cortex, you know, you kind of have a bit of concern that it might break. And if you're further concerned about the Quad Cortex breaking, it does actually come with a really nice bag. It's pretty solid, that's not going to break. So yeah, these are kind of my main points that I would weigh up against each other. For me, I find the Kemper in a live setting is a lot better. It's a lot better equipped for a live setting, particularly if you're like me and you like a lot of sounds and you like being able to switch between those sounds very quickly. I would say go for the Kemper. If you have not even a simplistic setup, but if you're maybe in a band where, you know, you've got a normal setup and you have two guitarists, maybe the whole issue with having a bigger setup just in one preset isn't too much of a big deal for you. I would just say my biggest criticism with the Neural DSP is you have the potential to create everything. This thing is crazy. It can do everything, and it'll tell you how much CPU it's using as well. So, like, if you're worried about overloading it, it will let you know that we can't do this, you know. But you do need to keep in mind, even though it could potentially do everything, there are certain restrictions within it that mean that it can't. It can't do everything. So that is my biggest criticism. It could do everything that the Kemper does and more, but because of these tiny things, really small things, it can't do it quite as well for a live setting, just in my opinion. But my god, this thing is crazy. The routing options are crazy. The sound is awesome. So let me know what you think about the tones. I really like both of these amps very, very much. I think they both do a fantastic job of replicating real amplifiers. I think we've come so far with this kind of technology. Is absolutely insane, and I'm so excited to see what the next decade's going to bring in terms of this. I think it's just going to get crazier, in my opinion. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, whether you agree or disagree. Let me know what tones you guys like the best. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video.